Hello, welcome to my channel. So recently I just started my YouTube vlog and I really wanted to do a travel vlog, but the thing is nobody's watching them, so I think I'm gonna go back to my original video, and my original video was how you can be an English teacher in Japan. So I thought that video, although it only got like 150 views, I thought that got the most views, so maybe I can change my strategy around and try to make a video on what country is the best country for you if you want to teach English. So I wrote some notes here. A little bit about me is that I came from America and I taught in China for 4 years, and then I moved out of China and came to Japan for 4 years. So I have a little bit of background and knowledge about teaching in China and Japan, and I also know some people that teach in Korea, so I have a little bit of knowledge about Korea, and also I do have a little bit of knowledge about Thailand and Vietnam. So I'm gonna rank them from the top as far as what I think is which country is the best country to teach English in. So I'm gonna go down through a list and list all the pros and cons. And I think a lot of people can be nitpicky and choose all the things that they're personally that they don't like. But I'm just gonna go through an overall perspective, because I think different people have different pros and cons about each country. So for me, I think if you haven't taught English at all and have no experience, I think teaching in hold on, it's a little crooked. Let me just fix this tripod here. So yeah, so I think if you don't have any kind of experience teaching English, I think the best country, especially if you're coming from like America or the UK or Australia, if you're coming from a Western country, I think Korea would be the best option. So for the pros for Korea is that the cost of living is pretty cheap, but apartments can get costly, and the apartments are very small. You can probably find a studio apartment less than $1,000, maybe anywhere from $600 to $1,000. But the best part about this is that a lot of companies will pay for your housing. So I've seen people that taught English and who are friends, and they have housing paid for. Also too, in Korea you can you have to pay for a pension. So I've heard of people working for about a couple years and then leaving, and then they get all this money back. Also with students too, students can come, and because the cost for universities are cheap for foreigners, because they want a lot of foreigners to come to Korea, they can pay for a pension and then they get that money back. And sometimes it's a lot more money than they get for, because from what I've heard, that is it's like a percentage, kind of like a stock, where you can put money away, and then if the economy is doing well, you can get more money back. Also too, health insurance. I know recently in Korea that all the foreigners, you have to pay for health insurance, and the health service is the industry in Korea is pretty good. So if you get hurt or get sick, you can be covered in Korea. Some of the cons would be I would think the weather. So in the winter time it's very cold, and in the summer it's very hot. But if you can deal with those kind of things, I think it's something that you can just look over. One other con is recently pollution. Pollution that's coming maybe from China, from what I've heard, or even the pollution that is being caused by in the city. So if you live in Seoul, you might get a little bit of the yellow dust once in a while in the summer, and people do wear masks because of the pollution can get really high over there. But overall, it's pretty cheap to eat at restaurants, and it's pretty cheap to take public transportation, and taxes are very cheap. So I think starting out in Korea, you can probably make around maybe 2,000 to 2,500 US dollars a month. And then if you add in the fact that if the company will pay for your housing, you can save a lot of money. Also adding that with Korea, you have to watch out for a lot of these training centers that are called hagwons. And sometimes I hear people, bad horror stories about them not getting paid or just bad things happening. So you need to be careful and watch out for those kind of companies. But overall, I think if you work at a school, or I mean, a lot of these training centers are okay too, but I think overall Korea would be a good place to teach English. Also, if you want more of a countryside living, I think if you check in the smaller cities, you'll get more of the I don't know, less of the city life and more of the countryside life, which is, I think some people would like that. So I think Busan would be a great place. And then there's other smaller cities like Daegu around Korea. And you can travel within Korea pretty easily. They have a high-speed train, so you can get to a lot of these little cities really quick and for very cheap. So the next city, not next city, but the next country would be Japan. So I've been living in Japan for 5 years, and for me, I think I've considered all these countries, and I think for me personally, Japan is the best place. Also to when I'm comparing to Korea too, I think for Japan, one of the pros are it's a really nice country to live in, and it's really beautiful. So there's a lot of things you can see here, and it's a lot of cool things to do. So another pro would be they do have a pension system, but I don't think it's similar to. It's a little similar to Korea, but I don't think it's the same. I've heard in some places, not some places. I've heard with some people that with the pension, you can get it after working here for 10 years, and then some people have told me that people have gotten it as they left, as they left, and also you do have to pay for health insurance, and you pay according to how much money you make, and then you pay about 30% of the bill. So right now my health insurance, I pay about $200, about $250 a month. And then when I go visit the doctor, I only pay 30% of the bill, which is nice. The cons of Japan are that natural disasters. So I've never actually experienced earthquakes back home because I'm from Chicago, but quite frequently you'll feel the earthquakes. And I live in Osaka right now, so usually during the summertime is when the earthquakes happen, and they're pretty scary. But there are some places that you can move to that are not so earthquake prone. But usually during the summertime, I think because it gets so hot and maybe the plates start moving, and so you do get some earthquakes here. And also during the summer, there are typhoons, and also in Korea as well. But they're not as bad. They're just really high winds, high heavy winds with rain. So they're not too bad. So yeah, but the cost of living in Japan, it depends on where you live. If you live in Tokyo, if you live in the city center, it can get expensive for a small space. But if you live outside of Japan and you take a train, let's say like 30 minutes to an hour outside of Tokyo, you can find places, studios to one-bedroom apartments for again, like Korea, like $600 to $1,000. My apartment right now, I live in a 2-bedroom, but I live in between Osaka and Kyoto, and I live in a 2 LDK, a 2-bedroom, which is like two bedrooms with a living room, a kitchen, and a dining room, and I pay about $950 US dollars. But yeah, and it's not too bad. So working in Japan, if you want to find a job, it's a long process. I'm not sure with Korea, but with Japan, They take a really long process. Maybe they'll go through like a Skype interview, and then maybe they'll go through like a in-person interview, and then maybe they'll have like 2 of those. And so an average salary around in Japan would probably be going around anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. But I think the going rate right now, the last time I've checked, is around $2,500. The thing with Japan is they want you to work in their company for a long time. So what happens is you go through a company and you might get yearly bonuses that goes up about $100 every month per year. So maybe you get $2,500 one year, and then the next year you might get a raise to $2,600, and it might go up, and there'll be a cap. But that's why usually they want you to stay in the company for a long time. So I find that a lot of when I worked in China, I noticed that there was a lot of young people that came in, but in Japan I feel like a lot of people come here and they stay here for a long time. So in China, I've met a lot of people that lived there for a couple of years, but in Japan, I meet a lot of people that have lived here for 8 or 10 years, and who get married and have kids and just stay here. So the next country is China. The pros for China would be the cost of living is really cheap. It's very cheap to live in China, depending on which. I mean, actually, it doesn't depend on what country. As anywhere, whether you live in Beijing, Shanghai, or any of the other cities, the cost of living is pretty cheap. But the thing is, the apartment and the housing is very expensive. So in Shanghai, it's very, very expensive to live. So when I was living there, I lived in an apartment that cost about $1,000 for 1 bedroom. I mean, you can find cheaper options and you can find roommates, but the cost of living, not the cost of living, but the cost of housing just keeps going higher and higher. But the thing is, recently they've been raising the cost of how much they're paying teachers, so that has been going higher in cost. But sometimes if you work in some of these smaller cities, they'll pay for housing. So I know someone right now who used to live in Japan, and now she lives about an hour to 2 hours away from Shanghai, and right now she's getting paid, as she said, what did she say? She said she's getting paid about $3,000, and they're paying for housing. And she showed me pictures of her place, and it looked pretty nice. It was a 2-bedroom. The thing is, like, a lot of people don't want to go out into these far areas, so they'll pay a lot more and they'll give them housing. So that's a pretty good deal. Another pro is there's a bit of an adventure in China. When you go to places like Korea and Japan, they're very westernized, and they feel comfortable for someone who's coming from America or the UK or Australia. But in China, it's like a different ball game, and it's so different. But there's a lot of adventure, and it's really exciting to be there. If you live in these big cities like Shanghai and Beijing, or even like Wuhan or Shenzhen, there's just so many things to do. You can do so many things, and it never closes. And that's another thing too. In Japan, if you're looking for nightlife, there is a big nightlife in big cities like Osaka and Tokyo, but a lot of these places closes early, like maybe like 2 o'clock. And the thing is, the trains stop at 11, and taxis are very expensive. So you see a lot of people just staying out all night until the trains start working again at 6 in the morning. Korea too, you can get around cheap with taxis, but usually Korea you can stay out all night and you can party, and they have a really good nightlife. And with China as well, you can party all night, and their nightlife never ends. So yeah, one of the cons about China is that there's no pension, and there's no health care. So I mean, there is health care, but there's no health insurance. So if you want to live there for a long time, there might not be any pension. But the thing is, the cost of living is so cheap that you might be able to save money. And as goes for Korea and Japan, if you want to live there for a long time, you can get that pension when you retire. And again, with no health insurance, if you get hurt in China, that could be a problem. But if you're only staying in China for temporary, or even if you stay there for a long time, you can get health insurance from your home country, and then you can use it in China. But the thing is, the insurance, the health care in China is so cheap that it's very cheap to just go for a checkup. It's inexpensive. But the problem with that is if you go to a hospital, there's so many people in line, you're going to have to wait such a long time. And that goes for anything in China. If you're trying to travel, or you're going to an airport, or you're going to take a high-speed train, there are so many people and there's so many lines. So that can be an issue as well. Another con is the pollution. In China, the pollution is very heavy, and that's one of the reasons I left. They're still developing, they're still getting better. I mean, in the future, they are gonna get better. But as for now, the pollution was just too much for me, and you always have to. The water is very questionable sometimes, and I know a lot of the foreigners that live there, they would get like water filters for their sink. So China, it's a fun country, and you can travel to a lot of the other cities, and it's amazing. I've traveled in China while I was there, and there's just so many different places and different things that you can see, because China is so massive and it's so big. And when you go to these smaller cities, they're very cheap to go to. You can go by train anywhere from like $50 to $100. You can take the smaller trains, the slower trains for cheaper. You can also travel in Japan too, but it's expensive to travel through high-speed trains. And so if you want to travel through Japan, the cheapest way is the bus, and you can take an overnight bus from Osaka to Tokyo. It costs about $50. Wait a minute, is it $50? Actually, it's even cheaper. I think you can go for about $25. But I think it's $50 there and back. Alright, so after China, so Thailand and Vietnam, they're a little bit special too. I think they go through the same way too. Oh, and with China, you can make about anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. I know some of the international schools that you can work at, some people can make up to $4,000 a month, US dollars. And so for Thailand and Vietnam, they're pretty much the same. I hear in Vietnam, you kind of just work through. It's not like Japan, Korea, and China, where you go to a school and you stay there and you just work all day. Vietnam, I believe you pick up your classes. So you kind of just go and teach those classes, and you can just pick up as many classes as possible, and you get paid for those classes. And in Thailand and Vietnam, I know you can make anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000. But the thing is, the cost of living is very cheap in Thailand and Vietnam. You can even get a apartment in Thailand for $200 for a small space. So in Thailand, you can get from anywhere from $200 a month to $2,000 a month, and it depends on how you want to live. And Vietnam as well. You can find cheap housing. And the thing is, the pros about Thailand and Vietnam is that you are so close to all the other Asian countries that you can take a bus to you can go take a bus from Thailand to Vietnam, or you can take a bus from Vietnam to Cambodia if you wanted to. And then so there's a lot of adventure. So if you're like a backpacker, Thailand and Vietnam would be the best place for you to go to, because you can teach English and you can travel at the same time on your holidays. So the cons for those are that there is no health insurance, and there is no pension or health. Yeah, there's no pension or there's no health insurance. So it's a bit of a gamble. So if you were to live in Thailand or Vietnam, you probably should get some kind of health insurance back home, so anything that happens to you, that you'll be covered. Yeah, I think the people that teach in Thailand or in Vietnam are the people that are looking for adventure and that want to travel, and they can go to like the Philippines or Singapore, and they can go for really cheap, because once you're in Thailand and Vietnam, tickets are a lot cheaper. Yeah, so overall, I think overall Korea would be a good place to live to teach English. If you're looking for long term, I think Korea and Japan are the best for long term, because you can take the pension, and you can take advantage of the pension system. And let's say you do decide to teach for the rest of your life, you can teach there for 10-20 years and just retire. If you're looking for adventure, I think China, you can also teach for cheap and save a lot of money. I think it's very similar to Taiwan if you're interested in Taiwan too. I know a couple people, when I was working in China, they moved to Taiwan. Taiwan is, I think for people that live in China, I think you gotta be a little bit tough, because there's so many people, and it's kind of like, survival of the fittest there. So if you want something more laid back, I would suggest Taiwan. You can probably get, the thing about Taiwan is that the cost of housing, the cost of living is cheap, and the housing cost is cheap as well. So if you're not living in like the city center of Taipei, even I think if you live in Taipei, it's pretty cheap for housing, but you can live in Taiwan for pretty cheap and teach English, and it's a very laid back society, so it's pretty nice there too. Yeah, so if you're looking to teach in the long haul, I think Japan and Korea would be good. I know there's a lot of people that even that live in Japan and Korea for 10 plus years, and they enjoy it. Also too with China, I've met a lot of people that are looking for their passion. So I've met someone who was in film, and now he's he makes videos for Porsche, sometimes commercials for Porsche and like Land Rovers. So I think he because he's in his home country, there's a lot of competition, but when he comes to China, there's more opportunities for him. I'm not sure why, but maybe because he is a foreigner, and I'm not sure why, but he's done really well for himself. And then I know some other people who also have taught English when they've gotten to China, but they want to do theater. So I know a guy who's doing like theater in China, and he does that. And so I think a lot of people who are dreamers and they're passionate about what they want to do, whether it's dancing, singing, acting, or film, whatever it is, I feel that a lot of young people come to China in search for that dream, or even like young entrepreneurs. I met a lot of entrepreneurs in China, in Shanghai. So yeah, if you like this kind of video, please let me know. Please comment. It really means a lot. Even if you want to comment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, just leave a comment. Just comment whatever you want. It really helps. Even if you comment ASJ, KF, whatever, just hit the keys and just hit the comment button. If you like some of these videos, please let me know and leave a comment. If you have any questions about any of these countries or how to go about doing this, please leave a comment, or you can email me. I'll leave an email in the link. So thank you for watching, and yeah, goodbye. Thank you.